Hello, and welcome back to my analysis of Frieren. With this episode, I've actually caught up to what I've seen, so starting next week, things will be blind. I'm pretty excited to see where things go from here. If you've been watching along and enjoy my analysis, but haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it if you do. I've also been streaming Elden Ring every Friday, so if that sounds like fun to you, please do drop by. In the last episode, we saw Frieren making an awkward but very sweet attempt to celebrate Fern's birthday. I think seeing Frieren's efforts has helped Fern open up a bit, so she's been generally more expressive. Fern also learned a defense spell that I think basically seems near universal, especially with the way Qual described it, and she used it in that very encounter. In the process, she learned that history isn't just knowledge, but something that can also be applied. The episode also revealed that Frieren's only real goal here is to retrace her journey with the Heroes Party. I mentioned being worried that she might end up kind of showing up too late for something later on in the series, but I guess that also got me thinking. So what is it that would actually catch Fern off guard? She's already experienced significant loss at a young age when she lost her family, and then she lost Hyder as well. She doesn't really have a stake in Frieren's adventure either. She's kind of just following Frieren and learning from her and also supporting her. But then I guess that might be the biggest blind spot, because we all know that Frieren is very powerful and an elf with a long lifespan. She's been alive for a long time and will likely remain alive for a long time. That's kind of my assumption, and that's probably Fern's assumption, right? But that's exactly why I think it could catch Fern off guard. I guess considering the series title though, like, even if Frieren were to die, it'd probably only happen near the end, I guess, unless the title itself is like a setup to catch us viewers off guard. But I guess this is all just speculation, so I'm gonna keep it in mind as I continue to watch.
昔は村総出で整備していましたが、
人手が足りなくなって放置ってわけか。
It might not actually get explored further, but I'm curious as to why the population declined. The scene doesn't really say much more, but it's possible that the young people in the town moved away to find better opportunities, leaving an old and aging population. The direct translation doesn't actually say that the population's declined, just more so that there weren't enough hands to take care of all the work anymore. So I mean, population decline could still be the intended implication, but I guess we just don't know for sure. That aside, I just wanted to kind of make mental note of this, just in case, I don't know, it does get explored later on, and maybe other villages or towns somewhere else are experiencing the same thing.
その魔導書、偽物ですよね。言われた通り勉強しているね。偉いよ、フェルン。
From her concern, we can see that Fern kind of picks up that there's something wrong with the grimoire. I like that Frieren praises her for taking her magic history studies more seriously, and just kind of shamelessly putting myself out there. I like being praised too, so if you feel like I've made a good point or did something well in the video, please do let me know in the comments. Admittedly, getting praised does also kind of make me feel embarrassed, but I'm pretty sure the happiness outweighs that embarrassment, so yeah.
どうして引き受けたのですか？困ってる人がいるみたいだったからね。
In this scene, we see that Frieren again claims that this is for herself. It seems that, like, when she does this, it relates to her desire to retrace her journey with the Heroes Party and fulfill kind of maybe unfulfilled promises and her memories with Himmel. It's also what she said when Fern asked why she was so insistent about the Blue Moon flowers, and as we know, their search for the Blue Moon flowers also ended up taking them a long time. I don't think it's a complete lie that Frieren maybe wanted to help the townsfolk too, but perhaps that desire to help people also stems from her memories with Himmel, and kind of, as they say, what would Himmel the hero have done?
いつもありがとうね、フェルンちゃん。一つおまけしといたから。
So it's been 3 months, and we can see that Fern's now close enough with the lady at the bakery to get free extras. It probably helps that it's a small town and Fern's a regular customer, but I think it also kind of goes to show that people tend to like Fern. I think the fact that they know she's cleaning the shore on their behalf might help too, but even then, I think it takes a little more than that to get freebies like this.
この時期の海岸は冷えるから気をつけよ。
Okay, we're definitely entering nitpick territory, but I just feel like in all of the anime I've seen, like, doesn't really represent cold weather well. As someone who's grown up with rather harsh winters, like, I guess we never see characters using little things like lip balm or moisturizers. Of course, I know that Frieren is set kind of in the past or in a different society in general that's like not as technological and more reliant on magic. But even if like lip balm and moisturizer in the modern form we know it doesn't exist, I'm pretty sure people in the past did make use of like natural oils and grease. I don't mean to say that we should see them applying these things like every single episode, every day, or whatever. That'd be pretty redundant, but like seeing it happen once or twice, maybe as the seasons change or when they enter a new, colder location, would help a lot to kind of make the world feel more real. Like, for example, we can see Fern wearing a shawl here, but she doesn't have like gloves or a hat or anything for her ears. Especially Frieren, who has long and pointy ears, would absolutely need some sort of insulation for that. And we know for a fact that Frieren absolutely hates the cold. So even though she can kind of be lazy and it might not kind of be in her personality to bother with stuff like that normally, because she hates the cold, I think it'd make sense to have stuff like that for her. And I mean, I just think this is a lost opportunity, but like little knit accessories to cover an elf's ears sound really cute. It also kind of confuses me that in this little part here, we see that Freeren's kicked her blanket off. My expectation would have been that she'd have bundled herself up very tight, like a burrito or something like that, and that'd also be very cute. But I guess if the room is well insulated and they had the fire in the fireplace going kind of before bed to warm the room up, then it'd make sense for Frieren to kick the blanket off like she has. Of course, I think the point of showing this is to show that Frieren has poor sleeping habits that put her in weird, awkward positions throughout the night. I know that I've already commented on this plenty in the previous episodes, but goodness, Frieren is such a bum and so lucky to have Fern taking care of her. I guess the usual bum habits have kind of been exaggerated as a result of the cold. When Fern dresses her, it's kind of heartwarming though to see, I guess, her putting the extra care to wrap the scarf tight, whereas she isn't even wearing a scarf. So she's like catering to Frieren quite a lot.
ふと思ったのですが、フリーレン様ってもしかしてすごくだらしがない人なのでしょうか?
So after knowing each other for 8 whole years and traveling together for 4, and realistically taking care of Frieren for like all 8 of those years, is this really the first time that Fern's actually like said this out loud? I guess it does actually make sense though, because until now, Fern's been really like reserved, I guess. So even if she was thinking it, she wouldn't say it. And this is probably kind of their first winter together in a cold place after Fern started opening up.
一人でもできるよ。
Admittedly, this makes a lot of sense. It's not that Frieren can't take care of herself, right? Because she's lived a long life now, and she's obviously been fine for the majority of it. But the mess and clutter would probably get a lot worse without Fern, and like she's just used to kind of taking care of these things at her own pace. And clearly that pace that she does take care of things at is just too slow for Fern. My interpretation of this is just that Fern's gone through the 5 stages of grief, basically off screen, and has come to the stage of acceptance. That she'll basically just always have to be Frieren's caretaker from now on.
怒られたよ。一度だけね。勇者様たちって寛大なんですね。
They say that the heroes party must have been forgiven, but with everything I've seen, like, Fern's been plenty forgiving as well, let's just say that.
あとはハイターがたまに舌打ちしたくらいかな。ごめん。
This might be the first flashback where Hyder hasn't primarily served as comedic relief, at least from Frieren's perspective, because I mean, obviously we got a pretty serious flashback between Hyder and Fern in episode 2. But going back to what I said earlier, it doesn't seem that the heroes party was forgiving so much as they kind of just tolerated it. They also weren't actively trying to manage or take care of Frieren, so in that sense, I think Fern's had it a lot harder. Though to some degree that might be by choice as well, because Fern could have just let Frieren be a bum and tolerate it like they did, but she chose to get more involved. Of course, that choice might have been made in order to not feel as though she was wasting her life away. It's nice seeing them warm up next to the fire and kind of enjoy the fruits of their labor, but I feel like being so close to such a large fire would be really uncomfortable. Not only would it be way too hot, like that close to such a big fire, but there'd also be a lot of smoke, which we don't really see. I get that it's a fantasy world, so maybe like it's okay because it's a magically induced fire, but yeah, I guess maybe I'm just thinking far too much about this.
新年祭までに間に合いそうですか？
なんとかね。
Frieren expresses her intent to finish the job in time for the New Year's festival. The townsfolk may have discussed this with her like previously off screen or something, but I took note of this because I feel like it's rare for Frieren to worry about how long something is taking. Of course, I have the benefit of hindsight having seen this whole episode, so I know that she wants to make it in time to see the sunrise during the festival to kind of fulfill that memory with the hero's party. But even without knowing that, I think the moment kind of stands out as a hint that there's something more going on.
でしたら今回はぜひとも日の出を見ていただけると嬉しいです。
I really like this small detail here where, as the old man mentions the sunrise, Fern kind of just turns to look at Frieren and is like, her? A sunrise? I guess at least we can see that Frieren's actually self-aware of this as well. I get that the point of this is to show that Frieren has terrible sleeping habits, but I find it hard to believe that she'd be okay sleeping on the cold floor like this. I guess maybe it's like the cold bothers her when she's awake, but once she falls asleep, she's gone. This little part of the montage really stood out to me. From the excitement of finding out that it's a pirate ship and the chest, to kind of Frieren's excitement as she opens it and disappointment, while Fern kind of looks on in curiosity and then bemusement, I think shows a lot about the two characters and that their dynamic with very little time. It's great to see that they made it on time for the New Year's festival as they planned, but all I'm going to say is I don't think that Frieren would have made it on her own. Putting aside that they had two people to split the work between, without Fern keeping them on task and on schedule, I don't think there's any way that Frieren would have kept consistent with the work.
正気ですか、フリーレン様。太陽が昇る前に起きるんですよ。不可能でございます。
So, at least so far, I don't think we've ever really seen Fern use this kind of strong language, so I think it really does emphasize just how much of a bum Frieren's been.
正直興味はないよ。だから見て確かめるんだ。
Since I do have hindsight, having watched the entire episode before working on my video, we know that Frieren wants to confirm whether or not Himmel was right about what he said to her in the past. I think I can relate to this sentiment though, because, for example, and this is kind of a silly example, but I recently heard about something called grilled cheese donuts, which absolutely don't make sense to me. In fact, I feel kind of sick just thinking about them, but apparently they're rather popular. I guess because I don't understand it myself, I'd actually be curious to try one, even though I don't think I'd like it or see it as anything special, just to see if I'd change my mind. Of course, my example is rather trivial compared to Frieren wanting to confirm whether or not Himmel's kind of read on her entire personality is correct or not, but I think it does make a lot of sense that even though she doesn't have an interest in sunrises in general, she does want to confirm that for herself.
ただの日の出でしょ。楽しめるとは思えないけど。
いいや、楽しめるね。
I find Himmel's confidence here interesting. I think it's true that others can sometimes understand someone better than they ever understand themselves, but it might also show that despite Frieren's long life, she may not have actually spent a lot of it on introspection, and while that might not affect her day to day, she still doesn't understand herself very well. It's incredible to think that Fern could have adopted Frieren at such a young age. But jokes aside, it made me kind of wonder if Frieren's parents might still be alive. I think they could be, especially considering the long elven lifespan. And if they are, it'd be interesting to actually meet them And I guess even if they aren't, maybe we could get a flashback or something like that. As we know, they are trying to head to that place where you can talk to the souls of the dead, so that might be a possibility too.
ありがとうフェルン
It doesn't seem that we get to see Frieren thank Fern directly like this very often, and I definitely think that she should do it more, especially considering just how much Fern really does for her. I really like Fern's expression here as well. It's like a slightly exasperated smile, and I think it shows that she really has accepted her role as Frieren's caretaker. And even though it can be quite a bit of trouble, she doesn't mind it, I guess.
ヒンメルは私のこと分かってないなフェルン帰って二度寝
So we get to see the sunrise, and it seems that Frieren's come to her conclusion. But the moment she sees Fern's expression, she stops herself. I think that might partially be that she doesn't want to ruin the moment for Fern, but also, even if she hasn't quite realized it yet, seeing Fern's expression there was enough to make her pause and reconsider.
そうかなただの日の出だよでもフリーレン様少し楽しそうですそれはフェルンは笑っていたから
Some things are special because they're experienced together. I think that's what clicked for Frieren here. Despite her lack of interest in sunrises in general, Himmel knew her well enough to know that she would have valued that group experience. When Frieren says that she wouldn't have been able to see this sunrise on her own, Fern chimes in, saying that she wouldn't have been able to wake up for it, so of course not, but I think we know that there's more going on here than just that. We get another flashback, and I think it's pretty rare that we get to see Hyder doing something so priestly. I think I'm starting to notice a trend though, where we still do get silly flashbacks as well, but as we've kind of gone further and further on in this series, there seems to be more and more serious ones.
でもたとえ実在しなかったとしてもあるべきものだと思います。その方が都合がいいからです。
Hyder's words here really resonated with me. I think it might be because I was a Christian for a large part of my life, but when I began to kind of distance myself from the faith, I realized that a large part of the reason I believed in the first place was because I thought that the world would be a better place if the things I believed were true. It was convenient for me to believe in the existence of God and in the existence of heaven. I think what initially made me feel disillusioned was realizing that the things that I wanted to believe unfortunately didn't seem to actually line up with what the scriptures taught, and especially not with what I saw, I guess, believers practice. That wasn't the only reason I kind of started to distance myself, but I'm not planning to really get into all of that right now. I also wanted to note that this is one of the few times, at least, from what we've seen so far, where Himmel is the one to use Frieren's usual insult toward Hyder.
僧侶がそれ言っていいのか生臭坊主
I like this transition and how it emphasizes how Eisen has aged. In a lot of ways, I feel like the signs of his old age are not as obvious as they were for Himmel or Hyder. So this transition, where it shows kind of it overlapping and it changing over the course of the transition, really emphasizes it. I think it's also interesting to note these marks of old age were not actually present pretty much almost at all, I think, when they met 30 years ago. But there's a clear and visible difference now. I've heard that there are some people who will continue to kind of look pretty young for a very long time, and then once they start aging, the signs of old age develop very rapidly. So Eisen may have really just been on the very cusp of that 30 years ago when they met again to see the meteor shower. She really is just so casual about it, isn't she?
たった30年でしょ
そうだな。
I find this scene interesting because I think it's been hinted before that Eisen's perspective lies somewhere between that of the human members of the party and Frieren's. His opening words would imply that 30 years is significant to him, but when Frieren responds, he doesn't have any trouble accepting that response. This may also be a way to show that dwarves' lifespans are somewhere between human and elf lifespans without kind of directly communicating that. It's a small detail, but the way Eisen's eyes shift in the direction where Fern is sitting is a nice touch. It's a hint that he's aware what Hyder's request was before the show actually reveals that they'd been exchanging letters. He also says that it's too soon for farewells, implying that he's actually got a decent amount of time left. We don't get to know exactly how long, but a couple of episodes ago, I was worried that he might not have a lot of time left, and that might catch Frieren by surprise. So it's good to know that he still has some time. So in my video for episode 2, when I mentioned that the two might actually be in a ship, my first question here is, are Hyder and Eisen a ship? I was mostly joking, but like, the more I see, the more I think it might be real. Another small detail here is that Fern is actually the only one to be polite and bow, thanking the carriage as it drives off.
来たことあるのか。
昔ね、
どれだけ前なんだ。
原始時代でしょうか。
I'm also having a bit of a hard time telling whether Fern meant that as a joke, or if she really thinks that Frieren might have been around since prehistoric times. She doesn't seem like the kind of person that jokes around, but maybe that kind of dry humor actually suits her. We finally find out what Eisen's been looking for, and it turns out to be related to the Great Mage Flam. The series didn't give us a lot of context when it mentioned that name earlier, when showing us that fake grimoire, so hearing it again really emphasizes that it is actually an important name, maybe not only in the context of this episode, but in general in the context of Frieren's life.
そうか。
途方もないな。たくさんあるぞ。
In this next clip, I especially want to focus on Fern's expression.
まあ、時間なんていくらでもあるのか。
This is perhaps the most intense pout that I've ever seen from her, and though we don't get access to her inner monologue, if I had to guess, she's thinking something along the lines of, "Oh great Father Hyder and Hero Himmel above, I'm dealing with two of them now."
フェルンが嫌がるから早めに終わらせようか。
This scene shows Frieren's growth and her ability to be more considerate of Fern's time. The series really makes sure to kind of make it obvious to us. I also found it cute how Fern turned around when she wanted to kind of reset her expression. As far as I'm aware, I don't think we've actually seen Fern get like angry at Frieren, but the only time I can kind of think of is when she tried to get Frieren to call off their search for the blue moonflowers. There might have been other moments in their 8 years together, kind of just off screen, but I think it would have been nice to actually see one of them now that Frieren's kind of referring to it. Eisen's made a point of mentioning that he's feeling the effects of his old age, and that he'd only get in the way if he joined her on her journey. But he's clearly still very strong. If his strength has actually declined, I can't help but wonder how strong he was in his prime. Most of the flashbacks we've gotten have been daily life stuff. We did get to see Himmel saving the florist in episode 2, as well as Qual bringing the party to their knees in episode 3. But we don't really get to see much about how the party actually fought in their journey together. It's insane that he's feeling the effects of his old age, but he's still able to do stuff like this. So we get a montage, and it actually shows Frieren using the sour grape spell that we know she obtained with Fern to sour some grapes for Eisen. I didn't quite make the connection when Eisen said he liked sour grapes in the last episode, but shout out to Igloo15 for leaving a comment and pointing it out. I think I try to be pretty thorough with my analysis, but the episodes are packed with a lot of details, so I'll inevitably miss some details while I focus on the things that I do notice. If you feel like I may have missed something, please don't hesitate to tell me in a comment. Looking at things from the perspective that this spell may have been acquired with Eisen in mind, the other spell Fern mentions, the spell that cleans bronze statues, may have actually been acquired with Himmel in mind, since we know that he's kind of left statues of him scattered all across their adventure trail. Admittedly, running into people who actually possess information about these spells may have been no more than coincidence, but it's clear that though both Fern and I kind of wrote these spells off as being useless, Frieren remembered these little details about her party members and acquired the spells for them, and that's very sweet. So I guess Frieren wasn't the only one in the party with terrible sleeping habits. Look, if their longevity and Eisen's strength even in his old age has something to do with this, I might need to get in on it.
なんでフランメの手記なんか探すことにしたの？
かわいそうだと思ってな。
Even though Frieren asked Eisen if he had something he wanted her to do for him, he basically asked her to do something that he thought would actually benefit her. It wasn't something that she would have done otherwise, and I think this might actually apply to Hyder's request as well. Hyder's primary concern was of course Fern and Fern's future, I think, but he might have also considered that even though Frieren said that she didn't want a disciple, she might actually come to appreciate having one. This might be a bit more of a stretch, because we know that Hyder asked Frieren to decipher those grimoires as a way to buy time for Fern, but if there really had been a way to extend his life, he might have wanted to do it not only for Fern, but also for Frieren as well, since he knows that Frieren regretted not spending more time with her party members.
おとぎ話だよ。それに今さら会いたいとは思っていない。
I feel unsure if Frieren actually means what she says here. Maybe at this point she's just kind of come to accept Himmel's death, and the idea of being able to meet him or talk to him again simply isn't realistic to her. But since it seems like there might actually be a chance, I'm curious what her response would be if that chance was right in front of her.
こいつが成長すれば1000年だろうがこの場所を守り続ける。
その頃には先生死んでるでしょ。
So we can clearly see that Flam was human. I think that's really impressive because in that regular human lifespan, she achieved the title of Great Mage and became Frieren's teacher. She shows wisdom and foresight as well, as she understands Frieren and what Frieren will come to need even 1,000 years in advance. This is another instance just in this episode where we're shown someone close to Frieren understanding Frieren far better than she could ever seem to understand herself. I think it shows that Flam understood Frieren at that point, and she also understood that Frieren wouldn't change very much, even given 1,000 years. And in that case, she would eventually come to regret something and need this knowledge.
この世紀の発見は
魂の研究を飛躍的に進歩させるだろう。
I find this statement interesting because, as far as I can tell so far, it doesn't seem like human understanding about souls has advanced very much at all. It might just be that that knowledge hasn't been relevant to us, so none of it's been revealed yet. But for some reason, I feel like the research either didn't happen as Flam may have expected it to, or it did happen and the results got concealed.
天国はある。その方が都合がいいだろ。
This is a very sweet callback to the conversation we heard from their party in the flashback earlier. It's also a small sign of the influence that Hyder's had on Eisen before Frieren gets the chance to spell that out.
大陸北部エンデ。今は魔王城がある場所だ。
So this is just speculation, but it seems likely that the research on souls may be connected to what created a Demon King in the first place. The Demon King would have then either prevented further research or prevented the results from reaching the ears of the public.
俺を手伝ってくれるんだろ。
悪知恵をつけたね、アイゼン。
We kind of get to see more and more just how significant Hyder's influence on Eisen's life was. I doubt it's canon, but you know what? I ship it.
なあ、フェロン。そいつはいい師匠か。
ただひたすらに魔法を求めて旅をして振り回されてばかりです。ヒンメル様たちを知ろうとすることには興味があるようですが、もしかしたら私にはあまり興味がないのかもしれません。
I really appreciate that Eisen asks this question so that we can get Fern's perspective on her relationship with Frieren. I think it's clear that she has some doubts, and I think they're very fair, considering Frieren's kind of general disposition, but the scene makes it clear that she does appreciate Frieren's presence in her life.
弟子を取ったりはしないのか。旅は話し相手がいた方がいい。
I never expected that they talked about this all the way back when their adventure originally came to an end. It looks like despite Frieren's protests, the rest of the party were pretty convinced that it would actually be good for Frieren to find an apprentice. I think they all understood that with her personality, while she didn't want one maybe, if she ever found one, she would come to appreciate the fact that she had taken them in.
時間の無駄だからね。 いろいろ教えてもすぐ死んじゃうでしょ。アイゼンならわかるでしょ。
俺は
This little part here again emphasizes that while Eisen can understand Frieren's perspective as well, he stands somewhere in between.
はいはい、暗い話はなし。今日はめでたい日なんですからね。飲みましょう。
I've noted many times now that Hyder often serves as like comedic relief and the butt of the joke for the party, but as we've gotten more flashbacks with him, it's becoming increasingly clear that he does it voluntarily.
フェルン、そいつはいい師匠だ。
Fern's smile here just looks so soft and gentle. Earlier, Fern mentions that she's aware Frieren only took her in because of her promise with Hyder, and that sometimes she doesn't think that Frieren has any interest in her at all. Of course, she does mention the effort that Frieren's made to celebrate her birthday, but it's understandable that she'd still have her doubts. I think it'd be nice if Frieren could do something to further alleviate those doubts, but it might be a while before we get there.
長い旅路になる。俺たちは10年かかった。
たった10年の冒険だよ。
Even though Frieren says the exact same words here, basically it's just a 10-year journey, something about it feels different. I'm not exactly sure how to describe what I find to be different, but it feels like she's starting to better understand the weight in those 10 years and the effect that they actually had on her. Something else to note is that it's actually almost been 10 years since she's met Fern. We're only 2 years away, so I wonder if there'll be some sort of special event for that 10th year, or it might happen for their 10th year of actually like adventuring together, and I guess that'd also be the 10-year anniversary, I guess, of Hyder's passing. So something we got to see is just how useless Frieren is when it's cold. They mentioned that Ende, their intended destination, is the northernmost part of the continent, and it's also where they had to go to fight the Demon King. This makes me curious to see how Frieren coped with that cold, or if she didn't, and I guess the party kind of just carried her for the last stretch of their adventure. I don't imagine we'll get flashbacks of that part of their journey anytime soon, unless the show decides to surprise me, but I am looking forward to seeing it eventually. I also feel very sorry for Fern, who, since they're going there again now, will have to be the one to kind of deal with her and take care of her through it this time. We also see that Frieren again invites Eisen to join her on their journey, but he refuses. This again reinforces that she does actually want to spend more time with the members of the heroes party, but I guess now the only remaining member is Eisen. Despite the fact that she made the time to kind of come visit him and extend an invitation once again, she still isn't willing to compromise her journey in order to make the time to spend maybe with Eisen in his last moments. But I guess Eisen himself said that it's still too early for farewells, so we know that he'll still be alive for a while, not exactly sure how long, but there's actually a chance that he'll make a reappearance later in the series. Even though he claims that he'd only get in their way if he joined them, it's clear that he's still plenty strong, so if he does actually come back to make a reappearance later, he might play a pretty significant role at that time. I guess I'm also pretty curious about the red-haired boy that we see in the opening with Fern. I think the opening makes it clear that he joins them on their journey, but he obviously still hasn't shown up. The first 4 episodes were kind of bundled neatly together, so it's I think it's very likely that he shows up next episode, so I guess that's my prediction. I'm definitely looking forward to meeting him and seeing what his role is, I guess, in their dynamic. Okay, that's all I've got for episode 4. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I still feel like I'm yapping maybe a little too much, and in this episode, I even kind of hyperfixated a bit on the cold weather stuff, but I guess I just hope that you found it entertaining in some way. As always, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe to my channel. Please don't hesitate to leave a comment letting me know what you think, and if you feel like there's something I could be doing better, or maybe something that I'm already doing well that I should keep doing, please let me know. I'm still new to making videos, and if you've been following along so far, I hope that you can kind of see the progression in my editing. If you enjoy the things that I'm doing and want to support me more directly, please consider supporting me on my Ko-Fi. The link should pop up on the screen about now, but it'll also be down in the description. Since I'll be going into episode 5 and on blind, I plan to post my blind reactions as Ko-Fi member exclusives. When this analysis goes live on YouTube, episode 5's reaction should already be available on Ko-Fi, so if you're interested in that, please go and check it out. To close off, just a friendly reminder to keep hydrated and maybe stretch your legs a bit. I'll keep doing my best over here with my translations and my YouTube content, so please do look forward to it, and I hope to see you back for the next one.